Welcome to What Drives You. I'm Kevin Miller. I spent a lifetime performing and producing, doing. Now I'm seeking how to be, how to find peace and fulfillment and my full potential as a human. So I investigate and contemplate and educate on human potential, and I share it right here. I don't want mere happiness. I want to find true joy, peace, and fulfillment in every day. In this episode, the 30-day guide to changing your mindset. So in my search for relevant messages on human potential, I have top publishers send me their lists of upcoming books. And in a list from Simon & Schuster, I saw How to Chase Change, 30 Days to Master Your Mindset. The title alone was worth a look. And what I found intrigued me, starting with the author's story. So if you see Alexis Fernandez-Preiksa on social media, to me, she looks more like an actress or social media starlet than a mindset expert. And that's part of what hooked me. Her personal story of drive was really interesting to me. She actually intended to be an actress, but kept coming back to neuroscience and how the brain works. Ultimately got her master's in neuroanatomy and kept going down that path. I think you'll really enjoy the story at the beginning of our talk. In a new audiobook of hers, it's called How to Chase Change. She walks us through 30 concepts. That's the concept of 30 days. And I found some of the issues she deals with, things I've pondered and not really heard anyone give a lot of focus to. Things like Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours concept. You probably heard that. Well, Alexis points out that just putting the time into something doesn't guarantee mastery. I'm actually going to talk about that in the upcoming episode after this. And she also points out that the idea of our limitations is errant. And I agree. We often hear, hey, you're unlimited. You can do and be anything. Well, I disagree. And so does Alexis. And she does some research on how our limitations are actually a benefit. I'm going to talk about that in the upcoming week again as well. And we got into talking about the concept of having an alter ego, which I've read about but hadn't really dug into. And this is one of those conversations overall where I wasn't quite sure what I'd get. And what I got was incredible insight on how to change and upgrade our mind and some big paradigm shifts. Hey, this is episode number 1472. We've had over 70 million downloads now. If you're new to the show, I'm grateful to whoever recommended you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the ads. They're good products and services, and they help support us producing 5 episodes per week. Hey, I'm a peak potential guide. Honored to be that for you. You can look at working with me personally if you want to. Go to kevinmiller.co. You'll see it right on the front there. All right. Drive with me and with Alexis Fernandez-Preiksa. Again, her book is How to Chase Change, 30 Days to Master Your Mindset. Let's look at how to make some mindset changes. Alexis, when this book came across my desk from your publisher, Simon & Schuster, seeing your interest in neuroscience, and you actually say neuroanatomy is what jumped out. And neuroscience, we hit that a lot on here. Mm-hmm. Neuroanatomy is a little bit of a different twist. Tell me about that.
So with neuroanatomy, obviously, because I always look at the brain, you've got to look at the brain as the hardware and the software. Yeah. And obviously the hardware is the neuroanatomy, the wiring of the brain. And when I started studying neuroscience, really delving into it, because I had done my undergraduate degree, took years off, and then went back to do my master's, the thing that fascinated me the most was how you can actually influence the anatomy, the actual makeup of the hardware of the brain through thoughts and behaviors and actions that you take and foods that you eat. And I found it really fascinating that you can literally rewire your brain. You can grow regions of your brain through behavior. And then based on the health of your brain, it can influence your thoughts and your behavior. So it's kind of this feed forward loop between the mind and the brain. So I think it was so important for me to kind of really delve deep into the anatomy of the brain and look at how are the regions connecting, and when they're not connecting properly, why are we feeling so stressed? Why do we have, chronic stress or chronic anxiety? And what can you do to change that? And I don't know, that just fascinated me, that just through thoughts and behaviors, you can actually change the makeup of the brain physically.
All right, I'm going to jump right in there, but I do want to, I mean, the show's called What Drives You. That's my book as well. And so it's interesting in looking at your story that you wanted to be an actress and then you found this interest, in the brain. And then you kind of did that, but then went back into it and then came back again. And when you look at it, is there any, and maybe there's not, I'm always enamored with the question, is there anything you look back on and go, oh, that makes a little bit of sense as to why I was interested in that? Was there some exposure along the way, or do you look at your personality type and look at it? Or is it just kind of I have no idea. It's just my gig.
I think, do you know what? That's a really good question. And I've never really thought about it in that way. But because I wanted to be an actor since I was so young. And that was kind of just the narrative that I said. And I still enjoy it. I obviously love performing. I've got my own podcast. But I had this opportunity. So I never did science in high school. Never. It was all art subjects and stuff. And then when I was in my undergrad, I thought, I'll just study. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. It was a bit of just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And one of the subjects was psychology. And in psychology, there was a guest lecturer that spoke about neuroanatomy specifically. And for the first time ever, I was like, wow. It really struck a chord with me. I don't know what it was, but I was fascinated. I loved every second of that lecture. So then I spoke to the lecturer straight after. I ran down the hall and I was like, I love this. I want to do more of this. And he said, change your major to cognitive neuroscience. Yeah. So I went and did that. But in my mind, I kept saying, no, but I'm an actor. This is just a thing on the side that I'm doing. And so I changed my major. I did the degree. It took me 4 years. And when I finished, the reason I didn't continue pursuing it is because I thought, you can't just enter the field just with an undergrad. I'm going to have to do further study. Maybe I'll do that for later. So even then, the story I was telling myself was still, I'm an actor. I'm going to pursue acting. So I kind of would push it to the side, even though I loved it so much. And then one day I allowed myself to just let go of the acting thing. Wasn't working for me. And I thought that it would be the end of everything if I gave up acting, that I would have quit, and I gave up. Yeah. And the one time I allowed myself, I just said, why don't I just take 6 months off? It's just take 6 months off. It was the best decision I ever made because it really led me to lean heavily into other passions that I had, and primarily was studying the brain. And I'm just so happy I did that because I was almost flogging a dead horse just because I was almost too proud to quit, Well,
we'll come back to identity. It's interesting as you talk about in your book, Purpose. And I've got a few years on you. And even now, though, I look at it and, what was the catalyst? I did have a lot of exposure and whatnot, but I've realized that if we just put it all in kind of into personal growth, self-improvement, whatever you want to, that I realize more. I think it's just, it's hope. It's hope that there's more. Not that I'm, I always want to caveat that, not that I'm not enough now, but there's more. What am I more capable of, and what are other people? And so I've latched onto it as a purpose aspect of it. It's just where I find hope and thus my excitement. And so that's why I posed the question to you.
Definitely. And I think that, from all the research that all the studying and research and everything that I've done, one thing that is the biggest creator of our happiness is growth. If you're always growing, that is one of the key factors to being a happy person. So I think that exactly what you said, this hope for there's always more, you could be extremely satisfied with your life, but always have this willingness to want to grow and acquire more information, learn new things. And that's what makes people happy. If I look at someone who's like, I feel stagnant in my life, I'm flat. And I'm like, well, where are you growing, in what area? And it doesn't even have to be career. It could be a hobby, but we crave this. We want to see improvement. We want to see growth.
Well, agreed. And if we don't, then we're going to do it vicariously through someone else that we're scrolling on social media. And it's not the same thing.
That's right.
All right. Going back to the brain, Alexis, you, in your book, you pull out, kind of pick on, I'll say, which is fair, Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. And given credit to that, obviously the people who excel and have mastery in something put a lot of time into it, but I appreciate you pulling out. It doesn't mean, well, here, I'll read what you wrote or what you spoke, but what does seem to hold true is the quantity of time spent practicing something with intention to improve is the main factor. And it reminded me of Robin Sharma. He's been on the show a couple times, and he has that quote that a lot of people know. Yeah, don't live the same year 75 times and call it a life. So when we look at that and you're saying, okay, we can grow the brain, and I think of it like a muscle. But I like how you pulled it out there, because I question I don't know that I grow my brain even by just feeding it new stuff. I can listen to 10 podcasts a day, read new books. But talk about that, because it's putting more stuff in there, but is it really stretching and growing it, like, pushing the envelope or stressing it? Tell us about that, because I think it's a little errant to think that just getting more information is by proxy going to grow it and actually cause change.
Yeah, no, that's really, So it has to be this, you have to put yourself in a position of discomfort. Like, I have to be really trying. The effort is necessary in order for you to see changes. I have to be really, it's kind of like, again, when you look at a muscle, it's when it's under tension. We walk everywhere. If you're used to walking, you're not going to see growth. You're not going to see much change. It's just like someone who, I read a book, I think the book is called Bounce, I'm pretty sure. And the author refers to this idea of the 10,000 hours as, you see people doing the same skill repeatedly their whole life and can get worse, such as driving. So it's the intention to improve, which is the key factor. I need to be challenging myself. And so passive receiving information passively is good, but it's very different to practicing something and actually putting it into practice. So I could listen to all the podcasts that I want to listen to, but unless I'm actually taking that knowledge and thinking, how am I going to implement this into my life? What changes am I going to make, and how can I really try and make this change? Then my brain's not going to grow. It's good, but it's no way near as beneficial as me physically making these changes in my life.
I like that. It reminds me of, counseling, and they're saying, you've been saying something this way, say it this way, kind of like quit blaming and take responsibility. Oh my gosh, you have to say it totally different. Like, what, Alexis? Okay, I can't say you're a jerk, but I feel really stressed when I talk to you. And, and it's so difficult to say it different. And that feels like the stress. Oh, I like how you put that. Yeah. Cause if I take, 2-pound weights and do 20 reps, it just is not going to grow my biceps. I've got to break it down. But I don't think that I think that we have that myth that, just by consuming information, I like that you said passively.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead.
No, I think, it's exactly that. I think a lot of people become really good at observing a topic, but they haven't lived it. And so they'll give advice left, right, and center just because they've heard of it, but they've not practiced it. And I think that's the key to change.
Gosh, that's probably an article right there. Seriously, the observant culture, that we observe things and retort it, but we haven't actually walked it out. Definitely. We'll do another show on that.
I know we need to. We could talk so much about that.
Well, so you come into, again, you've got so many points, Alexis, that's why you're here, that I just resonated with. And go into identity. First off, you talked about the brain. The brain is kind of like the hardware and the software. I even thought about, would it be fair, because I've just been playing with this analogy in another arena, to say, if the brain is our computer, like the laptop I've got sitting in front of me, that our mind is the OS. It's the operating system in essence. But we're saying, is that operating system, our mind, the computer, the brain is kind of just static. It's the mind that actually is the functioning mechanism. And you're saying it actually formats the computer, which is not relevant to my laptop. We're almost maybe like AI, like it learns.
Yeah,
there.
That's right. It does. And it heavily influences how then the brain will operate. And we're talking with the conscious mind. And then what's so interesting is, the subconscious mind and how you can influence that so much as well. But exactly right. So
4 kinds of, I appreciate you using the word schema, because that's not normal. And it makes us think about it different. But you say 4 kinds of schema in the mind: objects, self-roles, and events. Is it fair? Again, I like playing with words just for people who connect in different ways, to say the schema is somewhat your beliefs. And as you just said, though, our beliefs, the conscious ones and the subconscious or even unconscious ones, that some that we've accepted, some that we have probably unconsciously adopted. Is that a relevant scenario?
Very, and adopted is a really good word, because it's a lot of the thoughts that we have, a lot of the thoughts that people have, if you were to say, this is your predominant thought, they would say, no, I don't want that to be my thought. I want this to be my thought. And I say this to myself. But through how we were raised, through what we've been exposed to, or you might have been raised in a really healthy upbringing, but then had a really abusive relationship, that really heavily impacts the narrative that you tell yourself on a subconscious level, because you, like you said, you just absorb it. And unless you've got to be the gatekeeper to your mind, you've got to be the one who guards what enters and who decides what's going to go out. And a lot of the time it goes unchecked, and we kind of just allow these things to happen, and we think, oh, that's just me. I'm just like this, without acknowledging that you can actually change it. Not necessarily easily, but it can be changed.
So break down, if you would, those four, again, you said 4 kinds of schema: objects, self, roles, and events. Give us a quick overview.
So we're looking at it as it's your general, if you want to look at your schema as your belief system about the world, yourself, and how you engage within the world. So for example, your schema, and this applies to all of those categories, your schema could be, I'm lovable. The world is generally a good place to be in. People are generally good people. Opportunities are present if I put myself out there for opportunities. So and you would probably look at that as an optimistic person, but it's just your ingrained belief of, in general, it's a good place. If I'm nice to people, they're going to be nice back. And the opposite of that would be, I find it really hard to be loved. I'm unlovable. People always abandon me. I'm abandoned. It's me against the world. Things don't go well for me. I fail all the time. Life's a slog. It's a struggle. People are, they're out to get you. They're going to screw you over in a relationship. Watch your back. That kind of attitude. And so that you're looking at how people interact with themselves. I'm a failure. How they interact with the world. People are out to get you. You can't trust anybody. How you interact with, things, when, even financially, it's your relationship with your finances, about, how you feel about money. Is it evil to have money? Is it, noble to not have money? And so it's that deep ingrained belief that then determines all the decisions you make consciously and subconsciously, and your behaviors. How am I going to interact with a stranger if I think everyone's out to get me versus if I think the world is generally a good place? How am I going to be in a group setting, in an interview, if it's incredible how your perception of the world will actually determine the outcome of your situations because of how you interact with the outside world.
Okay, play with this with me, Alexis. I just did a show, and I don't know if it's published yet, but I did it a week or two ago with a guy, and it was on cynicism. Mm-hmm. And it was we kind of hit on the cultural, it's almost like this advocacy for cynicism. Like if you're a cynic, you're wiser, you're more intellectual. If you're more positive, you're just kind of naive. Okay, so we got that happening. And then we also have what to me feels like a huge movement for manifestation, right? Mm-hmm. Which it's the opposite. And it's saying, well, you manifest what you expect in essence. So if you expect crap, you'll get crap. If you expect gold, you get gold. Well, these things don't. So we got 2 cultural movements going that are totally polar opposite. And it feels like it puts people in a hard balance.
Yes. Yeah. And so the way I would look at that is, I see when it comes to cynicism, what I think would probably be better than that is to be able to critically think about something. I don't want to approach something with a negative lens, being like, what's the, I don't know about this, but instead think, that's really interesting. Let's break this down. Is this really how it is? I'd love to explore this thing deeper. My background is in the amount of papers that we had to, critically appraise at uni and learn how to break apart a study. Has this been done properly? Has it not? So I like to approach things when someone makes a claim. I think that's really interesting. I'd love to know how they came to that conclusion. I'd love to see how they did it. And I'm so interested. So it's not me saying that's probably flawed. I don't know about that. The amount of shit that gets published, So instead you're looking at it from more of a critically appraising something from a non-biased lens. As we're very biased people, it's hard to be non-biased, but as non-biased as possible. And I think optimism and being with the law of attraction and manifestation and all of that, it's so beneficial, but you also don't want to be gullible. You also don't want to think, oh, I'll just accept anything and just be happy. I always say to people, I hate, when people are saying, oh, just be happy, smile, be happy. It's like, that's no way near enough. We need to, I also believe that even with affirmations, you can't just say to yourself, I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich, and you're going to become rich. You've got to find beliefs and statements that resonate with you on an emotional level that make you feel better. And for some people, that might just be today is a new day. So it depends where your starting point is. But I think, if you can combine the two, be able to critically look at something without bias and have interest in the topic, not just to squash it and say, nah, that's rubbish, and also be able to be open to good things happening.
So you just mentioned bias, which you hit on in your book. And it's something that I have been enamored with for a long time, even looking at myself and going, okay, what do I really believe and what am I attached to? And I'm trying to cling to, for my identity. So we've got, so for people to look at a bias, if we can say a positivity bias or negativity bias or something, but then I'm also interested in that we're getting something out of the bias. Even if it's negative, even if I see somebody who's being, critical or cynical, they're getting something out of it. And my interest as of late, Alexis, is that it's generally we're protecting ourselves.
Yes.
Fair?
Fair, 100%. Because going back to the schema, we have a set of beliefs and those beliefs build up our identity. So if you have, even if it's a negative belief, even if it's a cynical belief, if that is part of your identity, you're then going to be biased to seek out information that confirms your identity. It confirms what you identify with. So that's why it's really easy for somebody to, if you're arguing with someone, they can pick out 1,000 points that will confirm their argument, but they're really bad at picking out points that go against their argument because they haven't even looked for it. They haven't even done, and it's not because they're trying to be biased. It's because their awareness is shifting towards things that confirm their belief.
Yeah. The bias, it reminds me of kind of the lawyer concept that if you're paid to fight for a side, you're by proxy, you got to ignore half the other evidence.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. That's what it feels like with it.
And it is like a self-fulfilling prophecy for a lot of people. It's very much this, if you say to yourself, I am unlovable, you get into a relationship and your behavior, and you probably don't even want to, you're pushing this person away, you're testing them, testing, and then they leave you and you say, I see, everyone's out to get you. No, you've just confirmed. It's this self-fulfilling prophecy and it can be very damaging, so damaging for us, but we don't do it consciously. We do it. Yeah. We just say, I was right. So I feel secure in the sense that what I believed was the truth.
Well, and there's a big point of your book on mindset is being aware of what we are doing. That's why we're picking the pieces out here. So you pulled out in the same segment, a Swiss psychologist and cognitive theory explaining how a person can change their schema with the term adaptation. Again, you're hitting on so many points that I am working on a project right now and being adaptive. I thought that's what I want to be adaptive. That's what keeps me. If I'm adaptive, I hardly have to even be resilient because I'm not getting knocked down. I'm being adapted, just like I want to be out, running in the woods. You adapt to everything so you can deal with it. And you said, according to his work, there are two different methods of adaptation: assimilation and accommodation. Now, I wrote in reading what you did, I'm always kind of paraphrasing in my mind. I wrote with assimilation, that is more so of a confirmation. We're looking for information. And though it's interesting because then it feels like you're not adapting. How is that an adaptation if you're just confirming assimilation?
I think it's because you're adapting in the sense that you're allowing new information to come in to be like,
and realizing it aligns.
Okay. Yeah, and realizing it aligns, but it's extra information in that regard. Yes. Okay.
Well, then the other one, which to me is kind of the big one, is accommodation of saying, I'll always remember this story. I cited a lot. I need to pull it out, but Anthony DeMello is a guy that I study a lot. He's passed away, and in one of his books, I think it was Awareness, and he tells the story of this this Swami, this, guru, he's 90 years old or something. And he hears some young guy share something and he goes, I've been wrong all this time. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I want to be that guy who doesn't cling to it, but hears something. And I'm first off confident enough with my identity, which is the area of your book that we're in, of my identity, to put it on the table, not be attached to it, but go, gosh, I believe in this because it seems to be true thus far. And now I just heard something. Holy crap.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. I'm going to accommodate.
Exactly.
That feels like, call it what you want, right? Transcendence, enlightenment. Isn't that where we want to get to?
Yeah, definitely. And I think a really great example of this is, when people will tie themselves so heavily to, for example, a political party. And instead of thinking, I'm going to vote for the party that aligns with what I believe is best, we think, I am a whatever voter. That's me. So you will, instead of, the moment you change your views on that, you can then one day hear someone else's point and say, that's a good point. Whether I vote for you or not, that's fine. But I can acknowledge that I've learned something from you that I haven't learned from what I've been aligning with my whole life. I think we're so big on assimilation and not accommodation in general. And I can't even go down the rabbit hole of social media and the algorithms, feeding you the same kind of information.
Yeah.
Because that's a whole nother episode. But that makes us even more likely to assimilate instead of accommodate, and to say, you know what, you've brought a really good point across. And I don't have to necessarily agree, but I can take that on board and realize that there's so much more to this. So I can be taught something from someone that I normally would disagree with. And when you can become that kind of debater or someone who argues in that way, that's where you really can educate yourself.
Okay, let's go a little bit down that rabbit hole.
Let's.
And so I'll put this in the intro. We're going to get through like 1/100th of the book. So go get the book. That's go do that, because we're going to talk about, in the time that we have, about some key areas, because that one, it really astounds me, honestly, Alexis. So I don't do a lot of social media. Instagram I'll go on because I've got kids and they'll share things of meaning to them. So I'll go on there and look. And so when I do, and I follow everybody like you. I followed you. So everybody I have on the show, I follow. And so I'll look at their stuff.
Yeah.
And realize that, and I don't even know how it works, that, I just searched for some product or something over here on whatever I use, whatever browser. And then all of a sudden I'm seeing ads for these things. Or I'm seeing things, I just looked up something on yoga and now I've got all this stuff on yoga. And it feels, and I have to catch myself, because it does feel like, oh, the universe has just conspired to confirm everything I'm interested in and every thought that I have. Look at all these quotes. Every one of them, they're totally in line. I can use all these for my next book. Not realizing what you just said. That's what the trillion-dollar machine is doing, is helping me. But it feels scary, honestly, to me, that it's going to sit there and give me these brilliant confirmations that's totally geared to feeding me the flavor they know I want. It blows me away.
Yeah. And the problem with this is, it actually, people say we're more connected than ever. I would argue to say we're actually more divided than ever, because we're being fed specific information that divides people more. One thing that I found so interesting, I'm not sure about the United States, but in Australia, they say never talk about sex, politics, or religion. And then you can have like a peaceful conversation as long as you don't talk about those three topics, at a dinner party.
Right.
And then I spent some time in France. I lived in Paris for about a year. And the French love a debate, and they will cover every topic under the sun. But it's culturally, at least around the people that I was exposed to, it's culturally very not only accepted, but they're taught to debate really well. They're not there character assassinating each other, putting each other down. They're like, no, tell me why your point is better. I want to know. And then they'll have this really healthy debate. So here, at least with the young people that I was hanging out with, they're genuinely interested in what the other person has to say. And they want to hear from your side. Whereas I think a lot of people, when they argue, they're just waiting for their turn to speak. They're not there to learn. I'm not seeking to understand you. I just can't wait to tell you what I think. Whereas, and that's kind of, if you look at it from that's kind of what social media is doing. It's like, this is what you should believe. This is what the other group believes. And then they clash heads because they haven't been exposed to the other side. It's not about having to agree, but it's about learning to be open-minded and understand the other point of view. That's how I think you improve relationships. There's many things my partner and I disagree on, but we talk about it and I can see his point of view and I'm interested in how he thinks. I don't think, oh, we're different. Oh, no, it's not going to work, and I think that when you can have that approach, your relationships improve massively, but you also are open to change as an individual. That's the kind of person that is open to evolving and changing and thinking that's actually a better path for me. This decision is better for my health. I'm not so ingrained in this is the only way because it's the right way.
Okay, again, the point here is mindset. And Alexis, if we talk about social media, so I'm here in America. I'm grateful for America. I'm not a super critic. I have my things that I'm critical about. But in this aspect, and it feels like we as a culture have attached our beliefs to our identity.
Yes.
So my mindset is basically back to self-protection. Is I believe these things and it's attached to me. And if you question it, you're questioning me is how it feels like. And I grew up even in a pretty staunch religious aspect. And it was that way. You don't question it. Question it's actually blasphemous. I mean, you're going to go to hell for question. And it's really, and I think that's permeated our culture. And you look at social media and you look at the headlines, which I go through cycles where I'll go for 6 months or a year and never look at the headlines. I mean, you can't be in a bubble. You're going to hear about everything.
Yeah.
But I'm in one now and I'm kind of checking out every once in a while. I'll go check out, the headlines at CNN or whatever and just see, okay, what's being talked about, like today, 9/11, what's being talked about. And oh my gosh, the polarization and the blame and the accusation and so few facts and so much just opinion. So again, we go to mindset,
That's
just
right.
like social media, it's just got to flavor it. And if we're not going to, maybe somebody's not going to not look at social media or the news, but if we can at least have the awareness, as you talk about, that this stuff is not geared towards harmony.
No, exactly. It's not. It's not. And I think that for your own mental health, you can still align with your beliefs. But I always say, be really stingy with what you identify with. Like you don't have to, you can just look at something and say, that's really interesting. I agree with that. But you don't have to say, that's me, that's me, that's me. Because the moment you say, that is me, that's my identity, then it becomes really hard to evolve that point of view. And even if you just look at personal things like your beliefs around health, your beliefs around what is best for you as an individual, again, you want this flexible mindset thinking, this is what I think is right for me right now, but I'm open to new ideas. I'm open to learning more. I'm open to knowing that I don't know it all right now. And if you have that opinion, then you're someone who's ever evolving. And if you speak to, and you would have spoken to, the smartest of the smartest people who have studied things that are unfathomable, they're the ones that have less certainty because they're like, this is likely, it could be this, there's more room for, and the people who are most like, this is definitely it, are the ones that are probably the least educated on the topic.
Okay, well, you just used the word a flexible mindset. I mean, again, to be in the culture that I grew up, well, I say culture / generation as well, that I grew up in, even that statement is kind of, that's questionable. Because not that they would say, oh, no, we're narrow-minded and fixed, but the point is to figure out the truth and then you stand on it. And that's what I grew up in. And now I find myself, gosh, I'm like 100% as certain as I used to be.
Yeah.
Which is kind of unsettling at first until you come to grips with going, no, gosh, the glory over here, it feels like the truth is in the flexibility or what would be another word, like the fluidity. Do I have a fluid or fixed? Do I have flexible or fixed? But even that statement is going to be hard for a lot of people to swallow. To go, no, I know the truth and you don't flex on that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, I think, what a lot of people really struggle with. Change that. And it's not, you don't have to say, oh, I'm wrong or I might be wrong. It's not even about that. It's saying I'm open to other ideas and concepts. I'm open to hearing it at least,
Okay. So again, the arena that we're in here in your book is identity. And you talk about purpose, which is talked about a lot. And I feel like because it's talked about so much, it's got so much baggage. I feel like it's so diluted that I don't know that it has much weight anymore. And yet I feel like it's the weightiest thing ever,
I think so.
as you talk about there. Well, let's go into some of the points. And you said, I love this. This is such a great kind of a worldview back to where we were. This is a question that you posed in the book. Do you think that purpose is found by searching, or do you think that purpose finds you? I mean, right there, that dictates what you do when you get out of bed in the morning. I don't know if I have a question. It's just a brilliant statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, but I think a lot of people are of the opinion that it will find me. Yeah. It will, like, one day I'll come across it and that's it. But I argue that it's you go and find it. And, because if you're someone that's, for example, someone will say, I've never found my passion. I don't know what my passion is. So I'm just kind of waiting around to see what that is. And I said, well, why don't you start doing a few courses that might be of interest? Yeah, but I don't know what I like. And I said, well, just start digging, start scratching the itch. And before you know it, you've got, you'll find the end. My mum always calls it finding the end of the thread. And once you find the end of the thread, that you can start pulling and pulling and pulling. So for me, I kind of went, I'll just go to uni. And this was unintentional, mind you, but I thought, I'll just go to uni. And then I thought, psychology, that might be interesting. And then I came across this lecture, and before I knew it, I found something, but it didn't slap me in the face. It was because I was taking action, and it didn't seem intentional at the time, but it's everything's a numbers game. I was putting myself out there. This is interesting. I just found someone that's quite interesting. I'm going to go down that path and that path. So for someone that doesn't know what they want, I always say, do a course in something that's slightly interesting. Then you'll have a conversation with someone that will inspire you to try something. And before you know it, in a relatively short amount of time, you've found something that's very interesting, which could then become a passion, which then you could derive some purpose from.
If, again, your statement, do you think it finds you? And you said you think that most people think it finds you. And just as we're talking about social media, news headlines, I'm afraid that we perpetuate that. The one I think about is Spider-Man. That the story there, that the guy is just bumbling along and he gets bit by a spider and becomes a superhero. Isn't that kind of what we all would like to have? We're just going to bump into it somewhere. We're going to just be sitting on the couch, which seems ridiculous, but I don't know that, or at the mall or whatever people do. And it's going to find us. And here we sit and we perpetuate that. Yeah. If I'm thinking about some of the superhero movies and some of these great things, we're waiting for the big thing to happen. We're waiting to get bit by something, or to fall in a chemical vat, or for the meteor to come that's going to end Earth. And that thing we're going to react to. And that's going to be our purpose. That's going to be our greatness. And that, as you talk about it, oh my gosh, if I look at the 270 plus books of guests that I've had on the show behind me, I don't know that I'm sure there are some, but I don't know many that go, holy crap, I just stumbled into it. Yeah. No rhyme or reason. I was at home and it fell through the roof. I don't hear those stories. They're like yours.
Exactly. It goes through. And I say this to encourage people to just put yourself out there, because more is, it's like attracts like, in the sense of, if I start putting myself out there, I'm going to start bringing more in. The energy I put out is going to be what I bring in. If I approach something with, it's a bit of a trial and error. I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to give this a go and see what comes my way. You're going to start to see doors open left, right, and center. If I'm at home, statistically, the number of doors that can open for me are going to be much lower than for someone who's out there interacting with the outside world, talking to different people, trying new things. And I think people are so afraid of wasting their time on something that was wrong. So they would rather sit in untapped potential for the rest of their life than give something a go. And it's this illusion that we have, that I'd rather sit here with the potential than actually try something and say I wasted time. But potential is nothing unless you do something about it. But we don't think about it in that way. So we wait and wait and wait and wait. And before you know it, that course that you wanted to start 5 years ago, you would have finished by now. There's so much that you could have just tried and started. We're so afraid that something's going to be the wrong decision. But the wrong decision, in my opinion, is not taking action on something.
Okay, so let's follow that, because I also appreciate, and I'm just going to paraphrase out of my notes. I pulled so much, again, out of your book. You talked about your own journey and finding purpose, in essence, in pursuing psychology and neuroscience. Now, in unpacking this aspect on purpose, you do hit what I appreciate of saying it does not have to be the biggest, most grandiose altruistic, saving the world, thing. Now, you also don't say it doesn't matter. You say it generally is going to be found in having some, in some service, in contributing in some way. But talk there, because I'm concerned, and I've got older kids, and I've seen them. Some of it's my fault of making the purpose so big. They're like, "Holy crap, Dad, I'm 18 and I don't know." And I had to back down and go, "Okay, you haven't experienced much yet. Just go out and try stuff like Alexis."
Exactly. Exactly.
But it is generally going to be found in some aspect of contribution. But do you feel that people, it can feel so weighty that they don't do anything. And so you're trying to lower the rope a little bit and say, just start somewhere.
Start somewhere. And when I say, so when we talk about things being of service, you've got to look at it is, how can I be useful? If I feel that I'm useful, whether it's to a group of 5 people or whether it's to millions of people, because I have a huge audience, wherever you sit on that scale, if you feel useful, you have a reason to get up every morning. You feel there's a driving force behind you, and you want to, it's kind of this, and it gets better and better and better. So for example, your purpose might be, I want to make every person I interact with happier after they leave interacting with me. So when I interact with them, when I leave, I want them to feel better than what they did before I arrived. I want to uplift them. I want to offer them help. I will see if I can support them in any way or make them laugh. Maybe I'm really funny and that's my thing, and I can use this for good. I can lift people out of their sadness because I'm hilarious. So it doesn't have to be this deep thing. It could be, how can I use what I've got and be useful with it? And you will realize that you start to change completely when you're using this purpose. And if you have no idea what your purpose is, and I think I say this in the book, but I can't remember. If you have no idea what your purpose is and you want to know what the feeling is, I always say, pick 3 strangers to smile at, or get 3 strangers to smile. The feeling of getting someone who's just walking down the street, whatever, getting that person to smile, and you've just lifted their mood. That feeling there of, I've just positively contributed to that person's day, even in the smallest way. That's purpose, that feeling. And you can apply that to all these other things, but it is this feeling of, I'm now useful. I have a role to play.
Okay, well, let me tell you, it is in your book.
Okay, good.
because I pulled it out. I love that. Play with me with it a minute, Alexis, because I look at it, and it's that feeling of what would it be? Of it, fills me up. It lights me, inspires me.
Yes, that's
whatever.
right.
And you're saying, and I appreciate you because you took it out of where we tend to go with purpose towards a vocational role or pursuit. And you're saying, okay, forget about that. Let's say you're up in a high rise somewhere and you don't even know what the product or service is. You just do your gig. And yet you're the guy or the gal that's known for, people can just talk to you. They just feel comfortable with you and they come to you with your questions, or you make them laugh, and people are attracted to you in that way. And that in itself is a purpose. And I'm going to use the bad word, judge it by how you feel, not by how you can explain it to someone else.
Yes.
Okay.
I think 100%. And I think that a lot of people will think, how can I align my purpose with my income? How can I join everything together? And you're making it too complicated. If they happen to align, great. That's a bonus. That's good. But I wouldn't make that my goal, because then you attach the stress of your finances to something that's supposed to be purely around something that's so personal and deep to you that shouldn't have anything to do with money. If they happen to align, that's great. But I would go so far as to say sometimes it's better that it doesn't. So you never attach the stress of, or the potential stresses of, career, work, finances, money to something that is so deeply personal and important to your internal happiness.
Well, I appreciate that. I know people on all spectrums, that what they do is exactly what gives them, what they do vocationally is exactly. And some where it's a little bit and some not at all, but they use the revenue or the time or the whatever to jump over there. And it's kind of knocked me off the pedestal I used to have, admittedly, of no, you do exactly what it is.
That's what I was the same as you. And I would think, find your purpose and that is what. But firstly, there's a lot of pressure in this. I think there's this culture of like quit the 9 to 5, and we can't have every single person in the world quitting the 9 to 5. And a lot of people don't want to quit the 9 to 5. I actually really admire the person that does the 9 to 5 and then switches off and they're really present in their life after that. I love what I do, but because I work for myself, my mind is kind of always working, so I have to consciously switch off at the end of the day because I could take it home so easily with me. I could always be contributing to writing or the podcast or this or that. And so I kind of really see the beauty as well in someone who's like, my job is there to provide for me and to give me the money that I need. And it's great. And I'm grateful for it. But I really come out with my purpose when I leave work. And then this is what I do. This is what I'm passionate about. I can see a lot of beauty in that as well.
Okay, tell me what you think. Come back to the feeling, because on this exact topic, I have in the past struggled with it. I'm finding more peace with it now, but I still feel like it needs more unpacking in the culture. Mm-hmm. I've got a buddy, I'll pick on him. He's a realtor. So he helps people find homes and he finds great purpose in that. There's no way I would. I just don't care at all. Yeah. And yet it gives him a feeling. And I've gotten to the point of wanting to tell. And again, I use my kids as my muses here of going, you know what? If it gives you that wholeness feeling, that inspirational feeling, maybe don't dilute it by trying to justify it. And that's not an answer we want. We want to define it.
Yeah, I know.
And yet I've come to that even with myself. So you're talking to a lot of affluent, people who have good means and helping them live an even better life. How do you just, I don't know. I don't know.
I know. And I think it is complicated and it's very like case by case basis as well. You've got to look at it as you don't have to do exactly what someone else is doing. You don't have to imitate what they're doing. But, for example, when I was in Bali, specifically Bali, but Indonesia, I find Balinese people some of the most peaceful, loving people in the world. And the driver that we had, Alit is his name, and he's an absolute legend. He's like, I have the best job in the world. I get to, and he drives for a living, people from, back and forth. And he says, I get to, watch the sunrise. I get to watch the sunset. I get to meet new people all the time. I get to, help people on their holidays. I get this. And his perspective of his job, he's like, this is the best. I love what I do. This is incredible. Look at the people that I get to help and I get to, and it's like everything's perspective. Someone could have a job as a driver and be like, oh, can't wait till my shift is over. This is ridiculous. It's a slog. And I think you can look at something and say, wow, I'm fortunate. Look at the life I have. And that's something that I really can take away from when you are in Bali. The locals there are just incredibly present and peaceful, and they're really patient with other people, and they're really understanding and accepting and very connected to their community. And I believe that they have a lot of purpose in their day-to-day life.
And who would you want to drive you? The guy who's just begrudging or the person who loves it? Well, that's another point that you pull out in the book is connecting. What do you connect with? And we all know that person where we go to the computer store and there's that one, girl, and she's just like, oh my gosh, she just loves computers apparently. Holy crap. I've never found some, and she's just effusive and ecstatic. And well, that's why I want to buy a computer from. And why does she connect with that? Who knows, who cares? But oh my gosh, she just brightened my day and helped me out more than the person who's there just for a paycheck. So I like that point too. So you pulled out for purpose, the feeling that you associate with. And then we could say what and who probably fair that you connect with.
Yes, okay. Exactly. And connection is, I talk about like pillars of happiness, and connection is one of the greatest pillars of happiness, but real proper connection. We're talking about where you actually feel connected. We're not talking about obviously surface level stuff or online or, sitting down with someone, but you're both on your phone. I'm talking about a legitimate connection, and it could be with the person at the store where you have a real interaction with somebody and you genuinely ask them a question. It doesn't have to be someone you know that well. It can be a stranger, but it's feeling this connected to the outside world. And community is so important for mankind. It's literally built into us to the extent that is why we are so afraid of rejection, because back in the day, if you were pushed out of the community, you die, so we've got this strong need to feel part of a community and to feel accepted. Which is, I think it's really interesting to understand it. So this is also why we care so much about what people think of us. Yeah. So it's this acknowledgement of, this is why I care. How can I learn to not care about the unimportant things? But I think it's also important to care about what the people that matter to you care about you. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like when it comes to connection, if I didn't have the people that I have in my life, the success, anything that comes my way, it just wouldn't be as enjoyable. Mm-hmm. Everything comes down to how I connect with the people around me, my family, my immediate family, my friends, and also the person that I buy a coffee off every morning. It's those little interactions make up a happy life. It's not this one big achievement there, one big accomplishment there.
Okay, let's go right there. Connecting with other people. And you are, I still don't hear this as much as I would think that that we should. It was, man, Alexis, it was, I don't know how, it was too many years, or I wish it was longer ago than it probably was. I mentioned Robin Sharma. Mm-hmm. I had him on and I asked him about relationships. It was a term around that. And he's the first person that I heard say, well, my first priority is a relationship with myself. Mm-hmm. Okay. One, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And two, though, I never did anything with it. It didn't go in. It was knowledge that resonated. And then I even talked about it and I didn't put it into practice. So mm-hmm. back to your point, I did not go and stress my brain with it and make choices at that time. And so you're coming in here, just as you're talking about community, you hit this pretty hard on, if you want to be connected to the community, how are you connected to yourself? This is one that I feel like we, again, as a culture, and I don't know that that's here in America. I think even globally to a degree, we don't get that. We don't get the connection to self. And you pull that out in a paramount way. So go down that trail with us for a minute.
Yeah. So your relationship with yourself is I would agree with Robin Sharma and say that it's the most important relationship you're ever going to have, because it impacts every other relationship that you have. It impacts, well, not only every other relationship, but it impacts every experience you're going to have. How you treat yourself, how you prioritize yourself. You can show up as a better friend, a better relative, a better parent, a better everything if you have a solid, stable relationship with yourself. And I think that a lot of people think, oh yeah, but I do these things. I care for my health. I exercise, I do this. So that's fine. But then they will accept, being treated poorly by somebody. They will accept, I always say how you treat yourself is the minimum standard for how everyone else will treat you in your life. If you see somebody, and I can speak from experience as well, because I've been in really emotionally abusive relationships in my past. And when I would be in those relationships, I noticed in hindsight that the relationship I had with myself was quite poor. I would allow other people to kind of determine where my happiness would be or what I would do. And I would kind of let them tell me what was what. And I wouldn't defend myself. I wouldn't stand up for myself. I would think I'd rather be with someone than be alone. Things like that is where you're not prioritizing yourself at all. You're saying that I'm not good enough to be alone, so I'd rather be in this situation, or I'd rather put myself in this situation. We take our power and give it to everyone else instead of giving it back to yourself. And I think when you start making decisions for yourself, when you start prioritizing yourself in that way, when you start doing a bit of an inventory on your relationships outside of you and thinking, is this actually conducive to a healthy life or not? That's all bettering your relationship with yourself. And there's hard decisions that need to be made. There's a lot of culling that needs to be done for a lot of people. But once that's done, everything turns around in your life. When you start to work on your relationship with yourself, every aspect of your life starts to improve.
I want you to unpack it more as a neuroscience person, because when we say relationship with ourselves, which we hear a lot these days, but I don't see it getting traction in the culture. And I have struggled a lot with getting traction with myself. And even that concept of, would you be, or can you be friends with yourself? It feels so like, I don't even know I don't have a file for that. I can be friends with you, Alexis, but me, how do I be friends with me? And I play with that, talk about, mind games and stretching that and go, gosh, would I be, and then recently I was thinking, would I be a friend with me? And why? And that was interesting, but it's still just weird as hell. The concept.
It's a very weird concept as well, because we can observe ourselves think. It's almost like there's two selves in the one.
It's schizophrenic, yeah.
Yeah. And I've always found that so fascinating about the mind, the way that you can actually observe who is observing who. I've always found that really, really fascinating. And Eckhart Tolle talks about that a lot as well in this, like the observation of the self or the ego and all of that. But when you look at this relationship with yourself, I like to look at it from, the standpoint of, you could go really deep in being like, who is the self? What is the self? But even from, a neuroscience point of view, when we look at how we've been wired, the beliefs that we have, that is all what makes up who we are, really, based on, your formative years, the first couple of years of your life, which starts to build up this schema that we have around ourselves and the world and the people and things that we interact with. And then if that goes unchecked, I think that can determine if you like yourself generally or if you don't like yourself. There's a lot of people out there who don't like themselves and who don't even know it. And a good indicator of that is someone who never wants to be alone. They never want to be in their own company. People avoid that at all costs. And when they are alone, they're on their phone, scrolling indefinitely. And they can't just sit and just be with themselves and do this like non-sleep deep rest where they're just relaxing and allowing their mind to be free, because they think of their mind as their enemy. The way I think, they look at it as a detrimental thing. I can't be alone with my mind because my thoughts go here. Which might be the case, but if you don't ever think, well, what can I do about this? How can I change this? Then it's always going to be like that. You're not prioritizing yourself. You could be exercising, having all the vitamins in the world, but if you're not hitting it from an emotional standpoint, thinking like, why can't I sit with myself? Why don't I want to be around me? Then that's never going to change. And there was this, I wish I could remember who said it. I just came across it on social media, and it was this really interesting guy, and he was talking about, I'm pretty sure he was like a Buddhist monk, but don't quote me on that. And he was talking about initially when you go through your thoughts, it's like if you haven't looked at your email inbox for a month and you look at that email inbox and there's thousands of emails and you think, no, I cannot handle this right now, some other time. So you keep postponing. He says, when you first open it, when you think, okay, let's tackle this, you first open it and it's very overwhelming and you don't get through all of them. That's like your thoughts. The second time you revisit it, you get through more. The third, and then before you know it, you've gotten through the whole backlog of emails. And then every time you check in with yourself, there's going to be a few emails, you deal with them, and then there's peace. You've emptied the inbox. And that's how you look at sitting with yourself and sitting with your own thoughts. Initially, it's going to feel like an avalanche. It's going to feel like you can't handle it. It's going to feel like there's too much going on. But the more you check in with yourself and think, what do I need today? How am I feeling today? Do I need to feel this feeling a bit more? Do I need to just allow myself to sit with this? Do I need to, all these questions that you ask yourself. And then once you start feeling it more and more and more and more, you become really in tune with yourself. And then you get to a point where you can very easily sit with yourself because it's not a daunting task anymore. You've become well acquainted with yourself and your own company.
I'm thinking about it, Alexis. I'm at a place I spend more time with myself than ever right now. And it feels vital. I mean, I look forward to it, especially in the mornings. But I'm thinking about, okay, right here, right now. So here we are. You're in Australia. But theoretically, we're looking in each other's eyes right now. I have your undivided attention. You're not scrolling on social media. You're not answering email. You're not paying attention to a cat jumping over there. I have your undivided attention. Do I do that with myself? Or do I sit on my couch in my office in the morning on social media or with content, even great books? Or do I have some times of just being alone with my thoughts, just like I would want from a friend? Those are my friends. I think kind of the love languages thing, time. And when I've got your attention, like I do right now with you.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a dopamine hit.
It is. It is. And it's this connection with someone else. Imagine if you gave yourself that 20 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, and you just sat and I'm just going to sit with myself. I'm just going to sit with myself and give myself that undivided attention. How often do you ask yourself, what do I need genuinely?
Yeah.
Not that often, you know? And so then your body, it manifests in disease. Your body's like, I need a rest. I need to stop. That's why if you work so hard, you get sick, because the body's like, if you're not going to rest, I'll make you rest, you know?
I love the thought, undivided attention. That's what I want from others. Do I give myself that? And if not, I'm missing out. Okay. Another point that you pulled up in this segment here is under capabilities. And I appreciated how you came at how I'm going to, again, paraphrase it around how we judge ourselves with the negative self-talk, especially. So I'll pick on myself. You know, I'm one that has often said, I'm terrible with numbers and money and whatever. It's just Greek to me. And I say that negative self-talk. Okay. Well, you're supposed to, the thought is, oh, well, then you turn it around. Right. And I'm great with numbers. And what you pulled out, which I was so grateful for, because I resonated with, and you're kind of like, well, wait, let's get to the truth of it. Okay. The truth of it is I don't care. I don't want to be good with numbers or money. I can hire people for that. And I do. That's what bookkeepers and CPAs and, CFOs and whatnot are for. I don't want to. Well, then give myself a break. So that's right. The honest thing would be to say, let's not be negative, to say, I don't have a big interest in numbers. I really love words. And so I invest myself there, and I have other people to take care of that. Huge, what a freedom to let that go. And so you've got me to thinking, let's think about the things that we think we're bad about. Now, how many of those do you really give a crap about?
Exactly.
What I took from your book.
That's right. That's right. And instead of looking at it from a critical lens, instead of saying, I'm so bad at numbers, you could say, I've never invested time in numbers because it's not ever really struck a chord with me. Yeah. So there you've changed your language. You're not saying, I'm bad at this, I'm bad at that. It's, I'm sure I could be good at it if I invested time, if I was interested enough. I'm sure I could be good, but I haven't. And there's other people around me that the reason they're good is because they've invested the time that I haven't invested. I can't expect myself to be as good because I haven't put that investment in, and so then it's a lot, then you're able to look at it as like, not a flaw, but I just haven't put my time and energy into this. Hence the result. It's not great, Well,
I like the idea. You got me thinking about just doing an audit, look at the things I say, okay, what's I don't know, what's a good way to say it? My weak areas. I'm not strong in those. And okay, but how many of those, I don't connect with, and I don't really care to be strong. I would like, results like with money and whatnot, but or there's somebody that can do that so that I don't have to become here, because I really want to keep putting my time into words, into communication. That's what I appreciate. So it got me thinking about an audit of kind of the weak areas and what is really weak, or what is it just you're not made for.
Exactly. And you've decided that you don't want to invest the time in, which is perfectly fine. And I think it's actually healthy because you don't want to spread yourself too thin, but you've made that decision. Like, I'm not investing my time in this because I'm just not that interested enough. And I think it also comes down to give credit where credit is due. If someone is good at something, you say, you can acknowledge that person worked for it. So something that people say to me, and they say it as a compliment, so I don't get offended by it, but they say, I couldn't do what you do. You're just smart. And I'm like, no. I've worked really hard for this. I'm not a smart person. I've invested time in this, and through time I've learned, and I've retained information, and then I've learned more and I've retained, but that's very heavily correlated with the time that I've spent doing this. If you had spent that same time, you'd know the same amount that I would know. So I think when someone's good at something, instead of saying, oh, they're just naturally talented, you do them a disservice, but you also do yourself a disservice because you make yourself think they've got something I don't have. No, they don't. They've invested time and attention and intention into getting good at something. And if you did that, you could also be where a lot of people are. We look at people and we say, I couldn't do that. But why not? Why?
Well, you have a section in your book on discipline. And so in this framework we're talking right now, again, you got me thinking about just the audit, in a sense, of those things of where do I think I'm disciplined? Where do I think I'm undisciplined? And in those areas of undiscipline, do I really want to, or do I think I should? Do I really want to be I don't know, shredded, with a six pack and whatever? Or do I think that I should? I mean, at the time of life, I want to have a level of fitness, but I don't care to be shredded. So am I undisciplined, or is it an area? But then if it is an area I want and I'm not, where I tend to go to motive, where do you go to look at kind of that thing of, you don't want it enough? Well, why? Where can we go with that?
I think it's really important to see, does this desire align with my values, what I value? It's really easy to, and I think like being shredded is a really good one. I think a lot of people, they will see someone be really, really fit and they say, I want that. I want that. But they don't factor in the cost the cost to get there. And then you've got to look at it carefully and say, do I value that cost genuinely? Do I value investing that amount of time, that amount of, restriction from other things that I could be doing and enjoying? Does that align with what I value? Because if you are a foodie and you want to go out every night and that's how you socialize and that's what gives you life, do you value that lifestyle more than shredded? It's like, can I find a happy medium? Can I still be healthy, but also realize that my values lie in this really social life and it just brings me so much joy? Why am I fixating on something that I'm probably never going to do because I just don't value it enough, really? It's that it's not higher than my value for this really fun social life where I'm eating all the time. Or like my cousin's wife says, she said, why have abs when you can eat kebabs? So, she...
Agreed.
So she's got this like her value structure. She's like, I'll train, but not that hard because I love my food and I really enjoy. So I go to the gym every day, but I'm not like, I need abs. So whereas other people are like, well, I'm not, I enjoy eating out, but for me, it's this. For me, when I train, everything's about training. I love seeing how far I can push my body. I love seeing this, and people really enjoy that. So some people, for them, it's quite easy to adhere to that lifestyle because they value it. So it's not this punishment where they're hating their life. They're like, I actually enjoy many aspects of this, hence why I'm actually doing it. So ultimately for it to be sustainable, it has to align with what you value.
Boy, it pulls me to thinking too about cycles and seasons or chapters, maybe, because you talked about at the top of the show your investment in wanting to go be an actress. And when you realize that wasn't really panning out like you wanted to, and you've got this great interest over here, but it was still a hard thing to go, gosh, I'm going to leave that. That's been my identity, my trajectory. I've invested in it. And because as you were talking, I was thinking about that. So I was a pro cyclist and I was just keeping track, watching the Tour of Spain a little bit, or just keeping track of the results, especially if there's, people that I know that are in the thing. It's really interesting to me. And I look at it and, oh my gosh, I can feel it. I can feel being there and I kind of want to, but then when I step back, that season's passed. I did that. I'm done. I do not care to be on the road for 5 hours a day training and whatnot. That was a great chapter. But I appreciate letting some of those chapters go. One of my kids said this recently, one of my older daughters, and said that there's that feeling of when you invest in something, like you're supposed to do it forever. And she was looking kind of for permission to let something go.
That's really important.
Yes. But she was citing how culturally, why do we have that? Especially today when we know that everybody's going to have whatever the stats are now, X amount of careers, X amount of whatever. We shouldn't expect it to last forever, but we still feel like who we are today and what we're doing today is like who we are and what we do, and that's going to last forever.
It's this permanence, this need for permanence that we have, especially with our careers, and we don't want to see it come to an end. And I think that's also why you look at a lot of pro athletes who have a bit of an identity crisis when they come to retire, and quite young as well, because most pro athletes are retiring late 20s or mid 30s, depending on the sport, but they have a full-on identity crisis. I've listened to so many podcast interviews where they interview retired athletes who are at the top of their game, and people thinking like, once you've achieved the gold, then you've made it. And they think, well, then a lot of the time they get there and they think, now what? Like I thought that was my purpose. I thought that was my be all end all. I achieved it. And then I realized, like, who am I? What's my identity? And they don't, because they were deriving their purpose as being like, this is the one thing and that's it in my life, without being more open-minded, being like, I'm a multifaceted being. There's many things I could be doing. This is one of them. But then what can that evolve into, and what can that evolve into? you've got to be so much kinder to yourself in that regard and think there's a lot I could be doing. I'm choosing to do this thing now, but I could then evolve into something else completely.
That was me. I did that. I raced till I was 31. I was old by those standards.
Yeah.
And letting it go was hard. And I unhealthfully, in dealing with it, what I did is I just rejected it. So for a decade, I gave my bikes away, and for a decade I didn't ride at all. And it was almost like something I had to rediscover.
And why did you think you did that? Was it too hard to face it? Was it?
It's just who I was. I was not just an athlete. I was a competitive athlete. I mean, that's what I'd done since I was 10. So we're talking, 20 years of start. I mean, I've started over 1,000, races, and that's what I did. So when I left it, I really I didn't have a healthy way of doing it. So I just shut it off and didn't ride it off. I did go into running and kind of pursued that, but it was just so tied to the next aspect here in your book is, what story are you attached to? And that it was my story. And it was so much of, I don't feel like it was the only way I saw myself, but it was so much of it. I didn't know. I just wasn't cognizant of that I have a story that I have, like we talked about before. I've either, what would you say? I either consciously agreed with, or I've subconsciously or unconsciously, I've just adopted.
Yes. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, like with you, we brush things under the rug. We don't want to face it. I actually was having a conversation with a friend of mine in Paris. She was a French pro tennis player, and she was telling me that 18 months or 2 years out before she retired, she's 35 now, she got a sports psychologist, and the sports psychologist said, "Okay, what are your goals?" She said, "To quit, and I need to do it properly." So she's like, I want to quit in 2 years, but I don't want to feel like I'm having an identity crisis by the time I retire. And I was like, that's crazy insight, because I think a lot of people wouldn't want to face that and wouldn't want to, so she said, I want to, still do really well for the final 2 years, but I want to prep myself for the time that I leave, that it's the right time and it's the right thing for me, and I don't feel lost at the end of it. And I think a lot of people, we never really approach the end of something. We never really approach how we're going to wrap something up and closure on something, and how we can close that door and be really happy that that door's closed and we've wrapped it up at the right time and we're happy to move on. I think the finality of things scares us a lot.
What do you think about, I find myself in this vein of discussion coming to, we don't seem to naturally understand our transferable skills. And so here I am as a cyclist, but what it took to get on the podium was a lot of, you see a lot of athletes go into business, to be self-disciplined, self-motivated, whatever. That's great for being an entrepreneur. You see a lot of them go into that space if they don't go the other direction and just go to hell in a handbasket because they don't know what to do.
Exactly.
But if they're healthy to go over here to business, that makes sense. It's a transferable skill. So you can take the discipline and the what they did as an athlete and bring it over here. And I feel like now I see that with most people, no matter what they're doing, but so much. I've been doing this job for a decade. It's all I know. And if there was a merger or there was a whatever, or I got fired, I don't know what to do. And looking at transferable skills, it feels like, for some reason we don't tend to understand those.
Yeah, I know. And I think it's based on where our focus is and what we're paying attention to. And I think that, like, you look at, there's this study that was done on all these people, and they were asked, how many potential lives do you think you could be happy with different careers, different places that you live and whatever? And on average, people said that they could be truly happy living 7 different versions of their life. We are and that's on average. So there's people that have much higher numbers. And we're so ingrained in thinking that this is it for me. This is it. And I've got to make it work. And, they don't think of, wait a minute, there's so many things I could probably be good at. There's so many things that I could be passionate about or excited about. There's probably many cities I could be happy living in, many relationships that could probably make me really happy. And I'm just in this one strand of my life because they're the doors that I went through in my life that's gotten me here. But if I were to zoom out, there's actually so much. Like, I personally, I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't even think about if my podcast was to end and if, where would that evolve into next? And I think it's really interesting because I'm sure it's something that I love because I look at my past and the evolutions have been quite interesting and quite unpredictable, which I like. So I think if you could look at it that way, instead of thinking, is this going to end? When will it end? Think, I wonder what this will evolve into in the future. You've got a more optimistic outlook into the future, more open-minded into what could come next. What will pique my interest? Will it be relevant to what I'm doing now? Will I one day jump ship and do a completely different career because I find it so interesting? Instead of having this fear of, if it ends, what's going to happen? I'm going to be, who will I be?
Well, again, to your book on bringing us back to values, it reminds me of the value of values in essence. That I have Alexis, I've got a friend who's a renowned sculptor. So he does bronze sculptures, like life size and beyond. And we were at an event together and a branding guy who was trying to help him kind of expand his brand and what he did. And he said, ultimately, Scott, what would you do if you could not sculpt? Okay. You don't have hands to sculpt or whatever. What would you do? And he's trying to get him to the essence. And it finally brought him to, and he sculpts to communicate something. That's the essence of it. He's a communicator. He does it through sculpting. If he couldn't do that, he says, well, man, I used to work in audiovisual, TV and stuff. He says, I guess I could go back to that of filming stories that have meaning to them and communicate it in that way. And I could write a book, which he has now written a book. And he says, and I could speak, and he now speaks. And he does it in those ways. I love that. So to come back and go, okay, yeah, if you and I aren't podcasting, well, there you go. You've got a book now and you speak and you find these other ways, but it does require you to come back down to the essence of what you do outside of just the task of that role.
Well, exactly what you're saying is kind of how I got into doing what I'm doing. Because when I returned to study, I loved, lab work and all of that. And I thought, I'm going to go into lab research. Yeah. Then we were doing a lot of lab research at uni. And I was like, oh, I love it, but this is very isolating and I'm a very social person. I think this actually doesn't align with my personality. And even though I have a deep interest, I don't think I could do this day in, day out. I really admire the people that can, but I don't think that aligns with me. So then I thought, do you know what I would love? I would love to lecture. I would love to be a lecturer because I am on a stage, I'm performing, I'm interacting with people, I'm talking, I love public speaking, and I'm talking about a topic that I love. So I genuinely thought, that's it. I'm probably going to go into lecturing. I think that's what I'll do. So then I started the podcast because I thought, I'm just going to share with people this deep passion of what I'm learning. I'm so excited. Every time I talk about it, people are like, your eyes light up when you talk about the brain. So I thought, well, I'll do a podcast because when you teach someone what you've learned, it actually helps consolidate what you've learned. So I thought this is a good way to help consolidate in my mind what I'm learning while being an outlet for what I love to do. And then the podcast took off. So I never ended up going into lecturing, but I think it's exactly that. You go into what do I like? What do I enjoy doing? And there's actually many, many things that actually can fit into that criteria. We just look at this one path that we're on without thinking, like you said, transferable skill sets. There's actually many things that you and I and everyone listening could actually be doing with the skill sets that we have right now.
Okay, great segue of many things we can do, but it's not limitless. And I love that. That's your module 2 of the book is limitations and fears. And Alexis, again, it was just like a heck yeah when I saw that you wrote that, because we're in this culture of personal development, self-improvement, whatever, and you hear that so often of you can do anything. That's the big rock. You're limitless, and kids especially get told that going into college, right? Oh, you can do anything. Well, you can, but I don't think there's that many things you're going to do well. There's kind of a finite amount of things that you do, and you talk about that. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know that I've heard anyone speak to it. I've thought of that somewhat because I've been frustrated. Like the whole idea of you can do anything. It's because of my kids. I've had kids look at that and I realized, oh, that's overwhelming to them.
It actually is. Yeah,
it is. It's overwhelming, and it means it feels like it's a total free for all. And you're going, but you're only suited to do, many things, but I don't know what the percentage is. So speak to that because it is. I think, it scares us. So I appreciate you saying, no, there's some limitations to what you can do.
Yeah, there's some limitations. And I think it's really important to become really well acquainted with your limitations. Instead of looking at it as something that you avoid or something that you're fearful, I think it's really good to look at, there's two kinds of limitations. There's legitimate limitations that are completely out of your control, that no matter what you did, it's that, like your height, certain traits, there's certain sports that you just could not get into, there's limitations in that regard, as well as external limitations that other people, put in place. But then there's self-imposed limitations, and some of them are great that we have them, because like you said, not everyone can do everything. There's certain things that, and I think when we look at self-imposed limitations, to do a bit of an inventory on that and then dig into that and think, okay, what limitations have I put here because I want them to be here, because it's genuinely something I'm not willing to explore? And what limitations have I put in here because I've absorbed this information about myself that might not actually be true? For example, saying I'm not academic, and then you actually could be academic. Saying, oh, I only, like me, I was like, oh, I'm arts, I'm not academic. Then it turns out that I actually love academics, and I just never gave myself that chance when I was in high school. This is another thing, like the pressure you put on high school kids, like, they're 18, you're so young. And I feel like when you say you can do anything you want to do, it's almost pressure to do something great. And I think instead of doing something that you think will really align with what works for you. So I think looking at your limitations and saying, what statements do I tell myself? What is the conversation that I have to myself about what I can and cannot do? And write as many things that you can think of down. Write it down about, what am I good at? What do I think I'm good at? What do I think I'm bad at? And then through each one say, is this actually true? Do I want to change it? Or is it not true? Because there are many things that I'm not good at, but I'm more than happy to admit that that's kind of how it's going to stay. Because like you were saying before about, I'm not willing to get good at numbers. I'm not, because I don't care enough. So I think it's really good to look at all your limitations, self-imposed or not, and become well acquainted with that limitation. And then the ones that grind your gears and say, I wish that wasn't a limitation, look at it and say, well, is this something I'm willing to change? Is it something I can change? And that's where my energy should go into.
Well, I appreciate you pulling out academic, because that was, Alexis, I loathed school. I hated it. I hardly went. If I could go back, people are going to hate this. If I could go back, I'd have dropped out. No GED, no nothing. I'd have dropped out. I had my own business. I was racing bikes, and I had my interest and none in school. Now bring me out of that. And like what you said, I hadn't thought about it this way till now, but from an academic, how you define that? Oh my gosh. I spend most of my time reading, researching books, communicating, making points. I'm entirely academic in the area that I care about.
Yes.
But the self story has been, oh, I'm not academic.
Mm-hmm. And you talk to academics all the time like this. You're like drinking it up all the time.
I've had every, Ivy League professor on the show, and we resonate, and I get it. And they're, impressed with my acumen in that finite area. Again, back to here's a line that you actually headlined a section in your book, and I loved it. And I'll ask you to just unpack it a little bit. Work with what you've got, so you've got more to work with. I love that line.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, we look outside of what we have, of our skill set, our existing skill set. We look at, oh, it'd be nice to have that. I wish I could have that. There's so much that you already have within your grasp already before acquiring anything new. There's so much you can do to change, to learn, to improve with what you have within your reach right now, with the resources you currently have. And we ignore a lot of that. We ignore the time that we could dedicate. We might have some spare time that other people don't have that we could dedicate to something. We might actually be really good readers. There's a lot that you can actually work with what you've already got. And you don't realize how much you could expand on that. How much, I say to a lot of people, especially with my podcast, most of the advice that I try to give to people is to help them improve their life with the resources that they've already got. I'm not asking them to go and spend all this money or do all of this. So much of bettering your relationship with yourself or bettering your mental health or whatever can be done with what you've got right now. And we always think, oh, well, until this happens, or until I get that, or when I get more money, or when this or when that. So we sit in this a bit of a waiting game. But I think that if you can look at, okay, how can I work with what I've got? How can I acknowledge what I've got and then do something about that? Your horizons will expand massively.
Okay. Well, on that, looking at mindset, and Yeah, I mean, again, shameless promotion of the book. I really, again, appreciate the segments that you gave and the analogies that you used.
Thank you.
I love. I'm going to use this one, and folks, go buy the book. I'm not going to give you the whole thing here right now, but you, in this aspect of growth mindset and fixed mindset, which we've done shows on that concept, and Carol Dweck, love her, but you pulled something out, and it was I don't know what, the Batman perspective or something.
Yes.
Well, you want to just tell us real quick?
Yeah. So the Batman, like a study that was done on kids.
Yeah.
And basically it's a really interesting way of framing your mindset when you approach a task, and it's got to do with how you perceive your own identities versus what you're actually capable of doing, or versus how you would approach something. So what they did is they grabbed a group of kids and they asked them to work on a task, like a puzzle task. But the way the task was done, I don't think there was an actual solution to this puzzle. They just wanted to see how long the kids would work on this puzzle trying to solve it before they gave up. And so they had 3 groups of kids. One group they didn't say anything to. They just said, you can work on this puzzle and that's it. The other group of kids, the second group, I'm trying to remember if there was an incentive to work longer or not.
I don't remember either.
I can't remember the second group.
Batman. Yeah.
But the third group, they said, assume a character, a superhero, assume like Batman. Okay. So pretend you're Batman working on this. And then the kids that were Batman, pretending to be a superhero, they really changed their attitude towards working on this task. They really were like, I'm going to do this because I'm Batman. I'm really going to try harder. They were the group that took the longest to give up on the task. Yeah. They invested a lot more time, and they were a lot more positive about the outcome of that task. They were saying, no, but I can do it. I'm just going to, they just really put their energy into effort, not in having to win, not in, it's not happening, so I'm going to get frustrated. It's effort. Batman would work harder, so I'm going to work harder. And it's really interesting. They weren't thinking about their own abilities here. They weren't thinking about, I've never done this before, I'm actually just going to give up. Or, the other kids have given up, they were just like, well, I've assumed this kind of alter ego, so I'm just going to go in and, and I think it can be really, really helpful to have this alter ego that you can assume when you're putting in effort, there's a book called The Alter Ego as well, which is actually really good, but it's taking on this kind of persona that has a different skill set to what you believe you normally have, and it can actually make you work harder. It can change how you approach a difficult task. It's really, really interesting that if you just sit back in what your limitations normally are, you say, I'll give up because I'm really bad at problem solving. But if you were Batman, how much longer would you stay problem solving? How would you approach it? Would you be a lot more lighthearted about it? Would you have less pressure on yourself? And so this study with the kids was really interesting to see how children adapt to something at such a young age where they don't overthink it. Imagine what we could do as adults.
I just like it on a couple different levels. One is, for a while now, I've thought of the power of saying, I am the kind of person who does what. So for me, I'm the kind of guy who gets up and, has this quiet time in the morning and meditative time. I'm the kind of guy who does a workout or exercise every day. I'm the kind of guy who goes out in the mountains, and those things I do. But then there's other areas of things that I want to do. And I know I haven't seen myself as I'm the kind of guy that I think, it's kind of like I want to. Yes. But to take this, and you said the word alter ego, and I had not heard that, though I'm curious if I might have read something about the book. I hope that they didn't ask to be on the show and I didn't do it. But I remember and they were using the analogy of, it's like Beyonce or something like that. Yes. Is that it?
Yes, that's the book. Yep. That's the one.
Yes. I read about it because she's like Sasha Fierce.
Sasha Fierce. That's right. Go. That's her alter ego. So Beyonce, when she was younger, was actually quite shy and getting on stage and all of that. And I think she is generally like not shy as in like afraid of people, which is a bit more introverted, a bit more reserved, like when she's just being herself. But the moment she's on stage, she assumes Sasha Fierce. And that is her alter ego, which helps her perform. The writer in this book, I really want to reference his
I know.
name.
I got to look. I'll look it up now.
Look it up. But he talks about coached athletes, and there were certain athletes that would really struggle with being a bit more imposing or quote unquote aggressive on court. But then when they would assume an alter ego, he was like, you could be this person when you're doing a high performance task. So you put all your energy into being like, I'm this different version of myself when I'm on the basketball court. And I don't have to worry about being too empathetic or too nice or too whatever when I'm performing. So you can apply it to anything that you want, but it's this ability to step into a different version of yourself. And it actually allows you to think, oh, well, it's not my normal me. This is a different version of me. So I can do this, or I can be outgoing, or I can, I can change aspects of my personality because I'm stepping into this alter ego. And it shows, based on this book and based on what the writer was saying, it shows that people are way more likely to step out of their comfort zone and do things that they wouldn't normally be comfortable doing when assuming this alter ego. So I think it's something really interesting to look into. Yeah.
I know I'm sitting here taking notes and thinking about, this is who I am part-time or whatever. Because even like this, I mean, here we are and we're having this, inspired, enthusiastic conversation. I'm an introvert. And so I'm also likely to, find me in a social setting as kind of a wallflower.
Yeah. It's so interesting. And I think sometimes we're so quick to label ourselves with this universal label of this is me, but it's like, we actually,
this or this. Yeah. It's so interesting. You, with that concept of just, again, mindset, what is that? We're back to these things, these overlapping aspects of the story we tell about ourselves, what we believe about ourselves, what our limitations are. It just, we're like, maybe 1/5 or 2/5 through the book. I appreciated your perspective from literally a neuroscientific standpoint to say these things flesh out. They're not just, concepts or random opinions. These things actually flesh out. And here are, the studies of those. And I know in the book you go into relationships and discipline and then end up with the next chapter. And we could do a 5-hour show here.
Good.
But that's why you're here, because it was taking these concepts. So a lot of them, so many of them we've heard, but to take them from this is literally the research. This is the science behind this. This is how our brain works. And I feel like an overall, I'll probably put this in the intro that, as you talk about the brain and the mind and the power of being able to differentiate the two and not be, not just be back in this fixed place.
Yeah, that's right. And I think even just the awareness of knowing, I think if you can step into, not just reading this book, but anytime you're doing anything around self-development, if you're able to look into how much influence you actually have over your brain and mind, it's actually quite, scary in an exciting way. I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for how much influence we actually have. And my, the why behind why I do the podcast and my books and everything is I want to help people change their relationship with themselves and their brains. And I think so many people, when they start realizing, wait a minute, this is not just some woo-woo, whatever, there's science that backs all of this up. Here's all these studies that have been done. I think people more than ever are more interested in science, I think, and which is great for me because I love it. And so, but it's really cool that you're tapping into people and more interested than ever. And there's more evidence and data backing how much influence you have over altering your brain and altering connections within your brain, which then has a direct effect on your life experience. I think it's just so exciting. I could talk about it forever,
Well, I'm grateful you do. And that's why we'll send people to get the book and to listen to the podcast. Cause I agree. I think we've been in this, again, I'll speak to my, older generation of where there's a lot of opinion. And now we got people like you coming out and going, no, this actually pans out. Here's the science behind it. This is, and you can, if you understand that, I think it gives us more belief in it. Ultimately, when you say, no, this is how the brain works and it actually makes sense. This isn't just somebody's, again, grand opinion from a motivational speaker standpoint. This stuff actually works. So I appreciate what you do. It's great to connect. I'm eager to share this with the audience and to keep You've given me some great perspectives that I'll be using in my own journey. So thank you, Alexis.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that talk. So thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you. Friends, thanks for joining us on this drive. That again is Alexis Fernandez-Preiksa, and her new audio book out by, again, I said Simon & Schuster, is How to Chase Change, 30 Days to Master Your Mindset. I got a question, comment for me or for Alexis? Let me know. Email me, kmiller@kevinmiller.co. And until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further. And most of all, enjoy your ride. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I look forward to meeting you in the Drive Tribe community for ongoing discussions about each episode. You can subscribe to the Drive Drop newsletter for weekly updates. Find it all at kevinmiller.co, along with all our social media and video clips. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and enjoy the ride.